You are listening to the best, the only place to be on Tuesday night. That's right, you're listening to The Right Stuff, and you're at the right place at the right time. From England to Canada, from Detroit to the Poconos, we are showcasing Christian authors worldwide, giving you tips, tools, techniques, and resources for you, the writer, to hone and perfect your craft. Tune in every Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time right here on WPJC 104.5. And your host, Parker J. Cole. And thank you so much for joining me for this edition of The Right Stuff. We are going to have an absolutely fantastic time today. We're going to be talking to my guest co-host and contributor today, Jess Hanna. And before I do that, I just want to thank you all so much for your support. As so many of you know, my grandfather passed away a week ago today, and I went to his funeral today. And I just want to let you know that your prayers, good wishes, and good thoughts were with me as I went through the funeral. It was an absolutely wonderful funeral. I was so proud to be William Thomas Parker's daughter. So I'm really thankful for you all who sent your blessings and your prayers my way. They were really very helpful. So thank you so much for all of your support. And as always, I want to thank you for your support of my writing career. You know, I just started writing under another pen name called Parker Payne. And so my new book, The Druid Spear, is available today for free. And it's on Amazon.com. It's called The Druid Spear. I wrote it with a good friend of mine named Lee Thornton III. It's available free today and tomorrow, kind of celebrating the planetary alignment that's coming into play tomorrow. So if you haven't had a chance, go ahead and download that today. And as always, I want to thank you all for supporting me. If you ever want to call in and weigh on our topic, you certainly can. Simply call in at 646-668-8485 and press 1 to be live on air. Or you hit me on Twitter at Parker J. Cole, hashtag Right Stuff, with your questions and comments. We're going to go ahead and take a quick short break, and we'll be right back after these messages. Don't go anywhere. More with Parker and her guests on the Right Stuff radio show. We'll be right back.
Question: if you write a book, everybody will rush out to buy it. Obvious answer, no. If you were a celebrity or if you had a huge marketing budget, then maybe you can get a lot of exposure for your book. Another solution would be to check out joeytweets.com. Joeytweets.com is a promotion and marketing service with access to over 1/3 followers on Twitter. Joeytweets.com has 3 packages available to fit any budget. That's JoeyTweets.com. Joeytweets.com. Get some serious exposure for your books.
Have you read the latest issue of Sormag Digital, the award-winning literary magazine for multicultural readers and writers? Sormag Digital is available quarterly and showcases interviews with the best authors in multicultural literature. Sormag Digital features craft and business articles for those interested in writing. If you're looking for a good book, check out our book reviews on what's hot in multicultural literature. For writers looking for new readers to get in front of, Sormag Digital is the perfect place to introduce your book. We offer advertising spaces that fit your promotional budget. Get your free subscription on Sormag.com or order a print issue on magcloud.com. If you would like more information about Sormag Digital, check us out on Sormag.com or contact us at sormag@yahoo.com. Sormag Digital is the magazine for multicultural readers and writers.
And we are back, and thank you so much for joining me for this edition of The Right Stuff. We will be talking to Jess Hanna. He is the author of the book, Adverse Possession. And one of the things that I was talking about in the show description is how Hollywood has really made a big genre about houses that may be possessed and may have spiritual occupants that are involved with it, from ghosts and hauntings and stuff like that. And so I wonder, is it all just Hollywood hype, or is it really true? And even more so about this topic, can Christians effectively write in this genre, especially in the horror genre, and still be able to present possibly a gospel message, or is it just something we're kidding ourselves on? And with me today to talk about that is my wonderful guest co-host and contributor, Jess Hanna. Jess, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Parker. How are you?
I'm doing well myself. And Jess, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us on the show today. I never take it lightly, so thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share my work.
Well, Jess, we were talking about, kind of before the show, we was trying to figure out what are we exactly going to be talking about. And so one of the things that come to mind is that a lot of Christians are starting to explore the genre of speculative fiction. But the genre that you work under, this massive category of speculative fiction, kind of falls under the horror category. And when people hear Christians and horror, they think there is not a connecting dot there. So I want you to kind of tell us in your own words, can Christians effectively write horror, or is horror just simply something we should not even delve into?
Well, I definitely do believe that horror is actually one of the most perfect genres in order to present the gospel message or a message of redemption. Most Christians do believe in the supernatural, but I think a lot try to downplay or ignore the dark side of the supernatural, which is definitely something that is in existence and working against the gospel message and the good news.
Now, some people may say there is no way possible that's possible. So you cannot write a Christian message in the horror genre. And I know you've probably gotten some flack for that, Jess. So how do you respond to people who say those type of things, saying there's no way a Christian can effectively do that? How do you respond when they say, I heard what you just said, but I don't believe you? Because all horror is people cutting up people and ripping their insides out. So how would you respond to that type of critique?
Right. Well, there is definitely a lot of horror that can definitely be very violent and bloody just for the sake of being violent and bloody. But if you look at a lot of the stories that are actually told throughout the Bible, there is a very large horror element to that, not only with certain supernatural elements such as demonic possession or consulting the witch at Endor, or different stories that are told throughout the Bible of horrific wars that are fought. But throughout that all, there is that light at the end of the tunnel pointing people to the truth.
I think that's a good point, because I remember one guest on our show made a comment saying that basically every genre that we write in is found in the Bible, and that is the horror genre is found in there as well. So I'm glad you kind of made that connection with some of the biblical things that are in the Bible. Now, Jess, someone may be listening to us and say, who the heck are you, Jess? Who are you? So go ahead and tell us in your own words, who is Jess Hanna?
Well, I am first and foremost a Christian and follower of Jesus Christ. I have been since I was a teenager, and I have wanted to write since I was in elementary school. I'd write little short stories and things about different fantasy creatures, and even have one that my mother found recently that has a cover that depicts what looks like a devil on the front cover, so I can only imagine what's in that story. And from there, I had wanted to write, and for many years just put that on the back burner. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, decided to start writing again and wrote my first book, which I self-published, which was The Road to Hell, and that led me up to Adverse Possession, which has recently been picked up and published by the Crossover Alliance.
So I noticed here that you said you had these thoughts like mystical creatures, and your mom found out or may found that recently, and you have all these things going on here, Jess. So let's take a step back here. Do you think there are other people within the body of Christ who want to write about these type of issues, mystical creatures, demons? They kind of are attracted to the dark side of things. With those type of people, do you feel as if they're outcast because the Christian message is supposed to be so much about light and about God's love, and you have people who kind of like to, I'm going to say dabble in like satanic ceremonies or anything like that, but they don't mind delving into the darkness of the human nature and the dark side of a tale. So what would you say to those people out there that may be experiencing the same thoughts you had? Did you ever feel alienated, feel alone? Do you feel like, oh, I can't be a good Christian because I have these kind of thoughts? What were some of the things you experienced?
Well, I definitely think there are some sideways glances or perhaps some questions when you do talk about things that are more supernatural in nature. I think that for some reason today there seems to be this concept in Christianity that we say we believe in the supernatural, but when someone says something that sounds outrageous, like there is actually proof that Jesus Christ died and was resurrected from the dead, that there can be a tendency to, in our minds, scoff at that idea with some of our modern sensibilities. So it can definitely make a person feel as though you're saying something completely ridiculous, but I feel that is definitely, the supernatural is real, and we need to explore it in order to discover the deception that presents to us.
Now, when you say explore, what do you mean?
Exploring just in the sense of, for example, with adverse possession, it really is it's my take on the classic haunted house story and what is really behind that. So really taking these stories of these supernatural events, we'll say ghosts, aliens, or other things that happen, psychic phenomena, and exploring what is it that's driving that force and what is their goal. And obviously from my own perspective and a Christian perspective, the goal is to drive us further away from the truth.
I think I really am on board with what you're saying. In fact, I don't think I know what you're saying, because sometimes some things happen to distract us from something else. And like you said, that we need to be aware of that and explore these type of things in our fiction and kind of in our thoughts too. I think sometimes Christians, they're so ready to not be involved in satanic things that they forget they need to be educated about some of these things. What do you say to that, Jess?
Yeah, I definitely feel that is a common problem today, that we're just not educated about what other devices, aside from the obvious things with temptations and different things that we face, that the enemy may use, especially with someone like me who, before and after I was saved, was more interested in the things that are behind the veil. So what are those things? And really just trying to expose them for what they are and what they're trying to do.
And we are talking today to Jess Hanna. He is the author of the book Adverse Possession. And if you want to go ahead and weigh in on our topic, you certainly can. Simply call in at 646-668-8485 and press 1 to be live on air. Or you can hit me on Twitter at ParkerJCole, #RightStuff, with your questions and comments. We're going to go ahead and take a quick short break, and when we come back, we'll be talking to Jess and more about his newest release, Adverse Possession. Again, feel free to call in at 646-668-8485. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. More with Parker and her guest on the Right Stuff Radio Show. We'll be right back.
Authors, are you looking for a new way to get your book in the hands of new audience of targeted buyers? Then a virtual book tour is for you. Right now, virtual book tours is an excellent opportunity for you to introduce your book and who you are as an author. Launching your book is very important. A virtual book tour will connect you with readers. We at WNL, we specialize in book tours, book blasts, radio tours, cover reveals, and Facebook chat. Promoting and marketing your book is what we do. Online publicity, the exposure and the publicity is what you need. Let us help you reach new readers and a new audience. We take care of everything so you don't have to. We set up the tour for you. We connect you with bloggers to advertise your book by way of interviews, guest posts, and reviews. If you are an author of a newly published book, have an upcoming release, or just want to give a previously published book new life, a virtual book tour is your answer. Check our tours out at www.wnlbooktours.com. Visit me on Facebook. I am the owner, Paulette Harper.
And we are back, and you are listening to The Right Stuff here on WPJC 104.5. We are talking today to author Jess Hanna. He is the author of the book Adverse Possession. We're having a fantastic time digging into the topic of Christian horror, whether or not it exists, and how do we reach the people among the body of Christ who may have a certain curiosity about what's behind the veil, as Jess Hanna said before the break. And Jess, again, thank you so much for being with us to help us really unpack this topic about these type of things. And so before the break, you made mention of the fact you were going with haunted houses in your book, Adverse Possession. And I want to kind of simmer on that for a minute, because haunted houses has always been something I have strayed away from. Not because I don't believe it, because I do. And the idea of something in my home coming after me and causing all kind of ruckus freaks me out without a doubt. So I want to kind of get behind your veil here. But what made you lead toward, writing about haunted houses in particular? I mean, was it an experience that you had? Had you heard stories? I mean, what was it about haunted houses in particular that made you want to write Adverse Possession?
Sure, definitely. Really, the driving factor behind that is the haunted house genre of horror, whether that be in writing or in movies, is actually one of my favorites. And one of my favorite movies is Poltergeist from the 80s. It's very effective, very scary, and yet it focuses around a family and things going on within that family and that unit. But unfortunately, a lot of these movies, they get some things right with the things going bump in the night, the escalation of events leading up to a final conclusion that just kind of falls flat or just continues the story. I really wanted to focus on getting a resolution so that people know if these things are going on in your life, this is what you need to do. So following that example of how to actually get rid of anything that was going on, whether that's a haunted house, a poltergeist, or any type of supernatural event that would affect a person who becomes a Christian. So the characters in the book actually do not know God, or they know God just peripherally. So I really wanted to present that to show that, the progression of events, and showing that in order to actually have victory over these things, you do need to be a believer and use that power that's available to you.
I think when you see movies like Poltergeist, and I saw that as a kid, and it freaked me out, which is why I would never see it again. You know how some movies are just embedded into your mind and you will never see it again. I mean, they're so there that, I can't do it, which is probably one of the reasons why I can't watch it now. I know that probably the special effects are nothing compared to what it was. Now the special effects are bad. You could probably sit through it, but for that matter, I just couldn't handle the haunted houses thing. But when you talk about how Christians and non-Christians are affected by the supernatural world, they're affected differently. And that has a lot to do with the relationship that we have with Christ. Now, Jess, I want to ask a hard question here. There are going to be some non-believers maybe listening in and saying, that's just a bunch of, hooey. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not, you can still be affected by these things. And a haunted house being possessed by some kind of spirit is one of the things that affects you, whether or not you're Christian or not. How would you respond to that type of statement from a non-believer?
All right, absolutely. And that was actually my point, is that it can actually affect people in a greater way if they either don't know the God of the Bible, or if, for example, they do know but they only marginally believe, because they don't actually believe that the supernatural exists. Doesn't mean that you couldn't have these events happen, especially if, a spirit in the spirit world wants to exert their power or show somebody some interest. It usually isn't overt in trying to scare the person away. I think that there's really an element of kind of intrigue and interest that gets someone started down the pathway of, looking into supernatural things. For example, the ghost hunting shows on TV, they usually have somebody who's a paranormal expert and someone who's a psychic there, but they never really see anything. So it just kind of creates this intrigue where you're interested in that, and really just draws you away from the truth that God wants you to know. So working to expose that is really what my aim would be.
I got to tell a very interesting story, because my husband has always been fascinated by that type of thing, especially haunted houses. And so, and I'm going to make it very short, but I didn't know he was going out to these places. I didn't know about it at the time. And when I found out about it, I was livid. I was like, what are you doing chasing after something? What is wrong with you? I mean, nothing's here. And I said, if anything comes in this house, you're out the house. That's what I told her. I was just like, you are not bringing anything in this house. And so he actually, he told me about a year later, because I could not have handled it when it actually happened. I know I could not have handled it. But about a year later, he told me about an event he had happened where whatever they saw, mind you, I don't whatever. But whatever they saw, it went after the people that were with him, but didn't touch him at all. And I remember thinking, like, that's because you were covered by the blood of Christ. I remember thinking that. I said, you're up there chasing after something because you just want to know so much about it. But when they met the road, what actually happened, you were protected and they weren't. And I'm using that example to kind of jumpstart my next question, is that when we talk about the supernatural, we're talking about beings that have personal interest. Would that be the right way to say it? They have personal interest, personal stake in what's going on here. So when we start to delve into the supernatural realm, is that something we need to be aware of?
Something to be aware of, that the beings have a personal interest in us, or okay, yeah.
Well, that's what I want you to kind of explain that to me. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, I think that the interest really has to do more with, because the bottom line, the spiritual entities that I believe are haunting or, showing us these different paranormal events, I definitely believe that it is demonic in nature, and that they're really using whatever means they have necessary to convince us first that something exists beyond ourselves, but then also trying to distract us from what the truth is, to get that drawn away. So their real goal is to keep us away from God.
That's profound what you said there, because if someone's trying to keep you away from God, then there's got to be a reason that it may change your whole entire life here. Now, I want to kind of go from talking about your book from Adverse Possession to some of your other books. And what kind of other things you discuss in your other books that you write talking about the dark side?
Sure. Well, the first book that I published is called The Road to Hell, and it's really about one person's journey into discovering that hell, in fact, is a real place and does exist, and then fighting against some of the cultural aspects within Christianity that are either trying to downplay that or essentially trying to say that hell is not a place that people go and doesn't exist. So really just using a person's experience of having a horrible life-changing event, experiencing hell, and then trying to fight against the idea that it really doesn't exist and that there are no consequences after we die.
I think that is something that a lot of Christians need to be talking about, that there are consequences to our actions and there are consequences to our decisions that we make. And so when you kind of put The Road to Hell and Adverse Possession side by side, if someone want to say, okay, is there a common theme in both of these books, would that be it, that there is a hell, that there's a supernatural, or is there some kind of other thing that you're trying to explore with both of these books?
Well, they both explore just a similar topic of Christianity and also how to find God. But I do think that the first book really delved into more of trying to explore the topic of hell and the reality of it, and then also exposing some of the forces behind some of the current trends to downplay the actual place of hell and the consequences of sin, where Adverse Possession was a little more, I guess you'd say, has more of a mainstream feel to it, where it's very much a haunted house story, and it does go into, obviously, the message that I'd like to convey with that. But for the most part, I was really having a lot of fun with it, and having the events happen within the house and escalate. But they had different approaches. So the second book, Adverse Possession, I really started out kind of slow, and things seemed intriguing and became a part of the actual fabric of the daily life for this family, so that as each step progressed, they decided, they kind of absorbed that and just blended it into their daily life, so it became part of their routine, and was really trying to use that as a way to illustrate how sin can get into our lives, starting small, and we just accept it or just put it down as a level of, oh, okay, this isn't that bad. We can just keep going and doing this until it builds to a point where there's actually nowhere else you can turn once it has gotten to a point of no return, you have to turn somewhere, and that, of course, would be pointing to God.
I think that's a good way to also reflect what really happens in real life, that sometimes situations happen and there is nowhere else to turn but to the Lord, because no one else on earth has the answer to your problem. I think that's a good way of showing it, Jess. So I really appreciate you using the horror genre, using a haunted house, using these spirits in the spiritual realm to point to a real-life application. And I think, too, and I want your thoughts on this, because Stephen King, we both know, is like considered the king of horror, or was at one time considered the king of horror. And I've always considered horror, the more I've read it, it's not about gore or bloodiness. It's actually about the human condition and how horrible things can happen to people that may be out of their control or they cause themselves, and just how they kind of just de-evolve almost to a mass of just inhumanity. What do you think about that, what the horror genre really should be about? Because I don't think it should be about gore and tearing people up. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about really displaying the human condition. What do you think?
Right, well, absolutely. And I think one of the things that the horror genre actually illustrates wonderfully is the idea of hope. You see these characters, even if they are in a blood-soaked, gore-filled movie, which I'm not really a fan of. I'm not a fan of the kind of torture movies and things like that. I kind of like the old-school stories that give you, you know, the little bit of the chill factor, and then have a story that's built around this idea that there is hope at the end of this horrible circumstance, which I think can be relatable to so many people's lives.
That's a good point, too, because there is hope. Because usually you're saying, well, it can't stay like this forever. You can't be the victim forever. You can't be always on the run. You can't always run away from your problems. You have to face the monster. You have to face the situation. You got to figure out how to get out. You got to do something. Right. So there always is that hope. Because if you don't do anything, which is what some of the gore, because I don't even consider that horror, I consider gore movies and stuff, they miss the point of that. That in the midst of this darkness, a person's character kind of shines through. And I think that's what horror does very effectively when it's done correctly. I was thinking about the one Stephen King novel I read called, what's it called? So many of them. But I think it was Rose Matter. It was Rose Matter. And I think that's one of his unsung books, because the girl was in an abusive relationship, and over time she grows out of that abusive relationship to being a very strong person. And yeah, there's, the typical Stephen King-ish isms that are in there, but over time she grows into this very strong character. But the horror of her life is what led her down this path, And then finally at one point she just said enough, and she just moved on from that. I don't know if you read that one, because I used to read Stephen King a lot. So, but
yeah. Yeah, I have read Rose Matter, and I think that's kind of a theme that runs through a lot of his books, even beginning with Carrie at some point. Obviously the explosiveness of the events that occurred and what she actually did was horrifying and wrong. She still had a point where she had to face her own monsters, and that included herself. So I think that that's something that is very well illustrated in horror. You can only run away from things for so long before they're unavoidable, and you have to face them down.
Exactly, and I like how you said that. We are talking today to Jess Hanna. He is the author of the book Adverse Possession, which is available on Amazon.com and also from the Crossover Alliance. And if you want to go ahead, love him, my brother, support him and his work. You can get a copy of that today on Amazon.com or through the Crossover Alliance. We're going to go ahead and take a quick short break. When we come back, more with Jess Hanna about his publishing journey, about just some of his thoughts on speculative fiction in general, and more with me, Parker J. You want to call in? You certainly can by calling in at 646-668-8485 and press 1 to be live on air, or you can hit me on Twitter at ParkerJCo, #RightStuff with your questions and comments. We're going to go ahead and take a quick short break, and we'll be right back after these messages. Don't go anywhere. More with Parker and her guest on the Right Stuff Radio Show. We'll be right back.
Are you a reader looking for more compelling Christian fiction? Maybe something a little more edgy or a bit more real? Are you tired of most Christian fiction shying away from the truth and settling for a rose-tinted view of the world and its issues? Or are you an author who has a compelling story to tell, but you're afraid it doesn't jive with today's brand of Christian or secular fiction? Are you tired of Christian publishers telling you that your content is too edgy? Or maybe you've tried submitting your content under the radar to secular publishers only to be told your themes are a bit too religious? We invite you to take a look at the Crossover Alliance. We are an online publishing company that specializes in edgy Christian speculative fiction with Christian themes and real-world content. Our company is formed from authors and readers just like you who are breaking into the mainstream and Christian markets with this compelling genre. Head over to the www.thecrossoveralliance.com for all the details on who we are, what we do, and what we accept. Right now, if you sign up for our email newsletter, you'll receive a free digital copy of our first short story anthology.
Hi, is your book club in need of some fresh and exciting questions to ask club members and authors at your next book club meeting? Literations, the book conversation game, is 70 thought-provoking questions to really get into an in-depth discussion about the books you and your club members are reading. These questions really get into the characters, the storyline, and into the author's head. These questions may just give you and your book club members a whole new way to get into a new conversation, a literation. Literations is also a great set of tools for bloggers, interviewers, and authors to use a discussion question. Are you ready to get lit? Please visit our website at litversations.com, litversation.com. And please like our Facebook page at Simply Said Reading Accessories. Thank you.
This broadcast of the PJC Media Network seeks to present wholesome, thought-provoking, and entertaining content. However, the views expressed by the hosts of PJC Media are theirs and theirs alone. They do not reflect the views of this network or its affiliates. Please utilize listener discretion. And we are back, and you are listening to The Right Stuff here on WPJC 104.5. I am your host, Parker J., and we're having a wonderful time with my guest co-host and contributor, Jess Hanna, as he talks about Christian horror, his new book, Adverse Possession, and just what the horror genre can actually do in favor of presenting the Christian message. We've been having a great time talking with him. Something new that's happening with The Right Stuff is that we'll be having reviews done by the book evangelist Deborah Dunson. She's an avid reader of all types of genres, but she has a special love in her heart for Christian fiction of all types. And so we will be playing her reviews on The Right Stuff. So here is her review of the book, When the Cowboy Rides Away by Deborah Dunson.
Hello, this is Deborah Dunson, your book evangelist. And today I will be reviewing When the Cowboy Rides Away by Molly Noble Boyle. At times there are stories that come along, and they are like taking a nice long bubble bath on a stressful day. When the Cowboy Rides Away was my bubble bath, and I really enjoyed it. Alex Lancaster was a true gentleman. He had an amazing personality. The way he embraced his circumstances could teach us all a lesson about resting and trusting in Christ. Maggie Gallagher was too trusting at times. It was very frustrating, but her determination to take care of her sister, nephew, and ranch was what helped her character to shine. I think the open and honest conversations Maggie and Alex had helped to build their friendship and the love that they had for each other. This is one amazing story, When the Cowboy Rides Away by Molly Noble Boyle.
And that was the book evangelist Deborah Dunson, and every week she'll be presenting her reviews with us on The Right Stuff, so I look forward to having her as a new addition to the Right Stuff radio program. And we are back talking with Jess Hanna. And Jess, again, thank you so much for joining us on the show, helping us to really unpack the topic of Christian and the Christian horror, what the horror genre does, and the little nuggets that make up the horror genre. And I'm really glad you're with us talking about it, because speculative fiction is on the rise, and right now everyone's, like I like to say, is a geek. Everyone wants to, know about Star Trek, or know about Star Wars, or know about comic books, and everyone's on the bandwagon, whereas before this was kind of a niche market with some of us who actually understood what speculative fiction was, the world building, and all that kind of thing. So as you look at now being the geek is the new fashion, do you see some drawbacks with it becoming mainstream? or has it always been mainstream, but now everyone is picking up on it? What are your thoughts about this new wave of people who want to become part of the speculative fiction genre?
Okay, yeah, well, speculative fiction, or I guess the rise of the geek culture, you could probably call it, is something that is kind of interesting because in the past, growing up, that wasn't necessarily accepted to be interested in all of these kind of, I guess you'd call them cult following type of things like Star Wars, Star Trek. It was very much frowned upon, but I mean, I think that it's kind of reflects some of our culture today, that it's okay to be different in some ways and have some different interests and not have to have everything be cookie cutter or have it be just one way.
I think you brought it out too, because I remember when I mentioned Star Trek before, especially when I was younger, it just got the weirdest looks, like, oh my gosh, who watches Star Trek? Especially me, Jess, because I'm a diehard Star Trek fan of the original series, like Captain Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. I'm diehard, insane Star Trek fanatic, and I could probably tell you the little known facts. I could probably tell you just I could look at an episode still, know what episode it came from, so I'm a really diehard Star Trek fan. And I think my grandmother, who was the original geek in our family, who did all that too. And so you have these people kind of finally understanding what we love about the genre. But one thing I want you to kind of speak to is how Christians can use this wave of geekiness in either evangelizing, either connecting and understanding the pop culture, or just even just finding new interests that they can use to connect other people with. So kind of tell us how Christians can use this new wave of geekdom, for the lack of a better word.
Oh, sure, definitely. And while I'm not a big fan of I haven't watched a lot of the original series of Star Trek when I was growing up, I was very much watching Star Trek The Next Generation. I probably don't know a whole lot of details specifically about the series since then, but of course I've watched the later movies and have interest in that. So it was just interesting that you bring that up when I was more interested in The Next Generation. But back to the topic at hand, talking about how Christians can use that kind of wave of interest. It's always fascinated me that in the Bible, in the stories with the disciples of Jesus, they were all outcasts. They were people who had interests that people didn't understand and would, look at sideways and think that's a very odd way of living. So I think that is something that is very relatable to this current trend where people are looking more into that because it really is something that the outcasts are the people that live counter to our, I guess, secular culture that are really driving some of the biggest changes in the world.
Exactly. I agree with you there because these are bringing about some of the biggest changes here. And it's actually fascinating to me how a lot of the sci-fi is becoming sci-fact, and it's absolutely fascinating to me. Like the biggest one was when William Shatner was, see, I just went to my world there. William Shatner had his phone, and he flipped his phone when we had a flip phone was hot. He flipped his phone, and his friend was like, "That's your communicator?" and he was like, "What?" He was like, "That's your communicator, your flip phone, that's your communicator." And so it's just how there's this this lessening bridge between science fiction and science fact. And I find that interesting because sometimes some Christians can be intimidated by it because people think the more that we know about the world around us and the more that we understand how things work, that the need for God becomes less. And that's sometimes too with the big comic book movies, you have like people with superpowers and they're all running around defying the elements, like Storm, she's controlling the weather. And you have Wolverine with the adamantium skeleton and things like that. And they're thinking the more we understand, what do we need God for? Would you say that is part of what the supernatural realm is trying to do, is distract us by these advances that God gave us. I totally believe God gave us the ability to know more and more about his creation, but then you have the supernatural element that tries to block us from understanding that God made it, not us. You know, it's not something that just kind of came about. God made it. What would you say to that? Or correct my thoughts, if you will.
Well, I can give you my own thoughts on the idea that understanding more about our world and, you know, medical and scientific discoveries would lead us further away from God. I think that's actually opposite, at least in my experience. When I look at different scientific discoveries, I am always just amazed by that, and just am amazed at how incredible God is and works everything together. But definitely there is an aspect where I kind of hesitate to call it this, but it's kind of like a egotistical nature where, because we've discovered how something works, we think that we no longer have need for God and we can control things. But even like you said with Storm or with Wolverine in X-Men, for example, when you said that, immediately I had a thought of Wolverine and flashing back to his past and not knowing what it was that happened to him. So there's kind of an element there where there's still something bigger than everyone, even those characters that are larger than life.
Exactly. And one thing about the superhero thing, because everyone thinks all we got to do is, you know, mutate a gene and we'll have power to do whatever, which is kind of like what Heroes did. Heroes Reborn, what they're trying to do. This weird mutation happens. Everybody has powers, and then what it starts to become is the power of God. And for those of you, I'm really talking geekish right now. Like in S.H.I.E.L.D., I remember the first episode of S.H.I.E.L.D., he was like, before it was just us men, the guy who had the black guy who almost blew up in the first episode. I can't think of his name right now, but he was like, now we're dealing with gods. And he made this distinction that there were men and then there were gods. Like there was this natural evolution of people who will be blessed or taken with different powers, and how he felt so inadequate about that. And when you hear a message like that, what do you think when you hear something like that? Like now it's just only a matter of time before men become gods. What do you hear? What do you think when you hear that?
Well, it actually just makes me think of Greek mythology, where you have different gods that are existing outside of the realm of Earth, but then you have the Titans that were supposed to have come down to Earth and been godlike. So it really, to me, feels no different than that, and that kind of idea was discredited just as much as this idea that somehow humans are going to evolve into some kind of godlike creatures. It really isn't going to come to pass, and I think that it's kind of an arrogant attitude to assume that that would happen. Now, there's going to be advances in medicine and science, of course, that could help us live longer or perhaps cure diseases or things like that. But I think one of the best analogies that I heard was comparing the process of children being created and this idea of pregnancy and conception. We can see how things happen, but we still don't have a grasp of why it happens. Right. Why does this happen? Separated from God, it would make no sense, at least in my perspective.
Well, you make a good point, and what's happening is that I honestly think, and this is, again, I'm going to geekdom here, but I was thinking about the movie that they have on Netflix now called Uncanny, where this is a love relationship between an android, a human, and this woman. They're all in love. You know, there's a love triangle going on with it. It's kind of like Ex Machina, and there's this concept of how, in a way, humans are, quote-unquote, creating artificial life. And the problem with how God created us and the problem with how we create artificial life, like the robots and everything else, is that God did it perfect and we went wrong. But whereas we're making this artificial intelligent life already flawed. Do you know what I'm saying, Jess? Am I making sense when I say that?
Right, yeah, definitely. And if you look at the stories that people have written or told about artificial life, it's always something that is different from us. It's we've created it, but it doesn't have the same kind of soul or the same kind of essence as we do as humans. So there's something that is automatically foreign and different about it, and then eventually in all those stories they end up turning on us in some way.
Yeah, because they would come to the logical conclusion that humans are hideously flawed. You know, they will obviously come to that conclusion, which is kind of like the iRobot. They totally changed in the movie, but Asimov, when he did the story, it was about this artificial intelligence coming to the fact that humans need help, and we need to help them. So I really appreciate that. And like, if you're listening in, you're listening to The Right Stuff here on WPJC 104.5. And if you're holding online, you want to weigh in on our topic, simply press 1 and we'll be glad to take your question or your comment. Now, Jess, you know, we kind of went off into a lot of things under the speculative fiction genre, so I kind of want to understand, want our listeners to understand about the Crossover Alliance. Now, the Crossover Alliance is actually, I consider myself an unofficial partner of the Crossover Alliance because I'm on board what they want to do, but how has your experience been working with a publisher that is so open to promoting edgy Christian speculative fiction?
Well, it's actually been incredible working with the Crossover Alliance and David Alderman, Mark Carver, and Nathan James Norman, along with Peter Younghusband, through this whole process. So before Adverse Possession, I had started connecting with this group of authors where we wanted to, you know, be able to have a voice and get our work out there, which kind of grew into this idea of having a publishing arm of the Crossover Alliance. So I've been involved from the beginning with helping along with that process, you know, taking submissions and reading different work through the Crossover Alliance anthologies 1 and 2. I have short stories in both of those, and there's just some incredible work out there that we definitely feel is being overlooked. And I think that the Crossover Alliance is an incredible way for authors who have felt that their ideas are just too far out there, or just have felt that they've been rejected for reasons that have nothing to do with their ability to write or their ability to tell a story, that they have somewhere that they can go to get that work and also to submit their own.
I like how you said that, because they are working with authors who, like they said, their ideas are out there. Like for me, talking about artificial intelligence, artificial life, aliens, ghosts, that stuff doesn't bother me. But for some Christians, they're like, why are you even delving into this? And so you kind of need, for people like us who need that avenue where it's okay to talk about it, where you're not looked at as if you're the redheaded stepchild, you know, you need that. You need that outlet, and I believe that's what the Crossover Alliance is trying to do, and they're going to hopefully be the forerunner of bringing about this massive wave of edgy Christian speculative fiction. So I'm really glad that you're able to kind of let us know about that. So if they wanted to get your books, could they get your books on Amazon? Would they get it from the Crossover Alliance? How does that work?
Well, you can get it from anywhere that digital books are sold. Adverse Possession, you can get through Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can get it directly through the Crossover Alliance website, which is the crossoveralliance.com. You can also purchase it through my website, which is jesshannah.com. And, you can find my work there, and also the first book that I've written, The Road to Hell, and the anthologies as well.
We are talking to Jess Hannah. He is the author of the book Adverse Possession. And if you want to weigh in on the topic, you still got a little bit of time. You can weigh in by calling in at 646-668-8485 and press 1 to be live on air, or hit me on Twitter at Parker J. Cole, #Right Stuff with your questions and comments. We're going to go ahead and take a quick short break, and when we come back, we'll be hearing Jess's final thoughts about our topic today. So stay tuned right there. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere. More with Parker and her guest on the Right Stuff Radio Show. We'll be right back.
Question: if you write a book, everybody will rush out to buy it. Obvious answer: no. If you were a celebrity, or if you had a huge marketing budget, then maybe you can get a lot of exposure for your book. Another solution would be to check out joeytweets.com. joeytweets.com is a promotion and marketing service with access to over 1/3 of a million followers on Twitter. joeytweets.com has 3 packages available to fit any budget. That's JoeyTweets.com. JoeyTweets.com. Get some serious exposure for your books.
Are you a reader looking for more compelling Christian fiction? Maybe something a little more edgy or a bit more real? Are you tired of most Christian fiction shying away from the truth and settling for a rose-tinted view of the world and its issues? Or are you an author who has a compelling story to tell, but you're afraid it doesn't jive with today's brand of Christian or secular fiction? Are you tired of Christian publishers telling you that your content is too edgy? Or maybe you've tried submitting your content under the radar to secular publishers only to be told your themes are a bit too religious. We invite you to take a look at the Crossover Alliance. We are an online publishing company that specializes in edgy Christian speculative fiction with Christian themes and real-world content. Our company is formed from authors and readers just like you who are breaking into the mainstream and Christian markets with this compelling genre. Head over to the www.thecrossoveralliance.com for all the details on who we are, what we do, and what we accept. Right now, if you sign up for our email newsletter, you'll receive a free digital copy of our first short story anthology. Check us out today and help us spread the word about the Crossover Alliance, where light shines brighter in the darkness.
And we are back. You are listening to The Right Stuff here on WPJC 104.5. We've been having a fantastic time talking with Jess Hanna. He is the author of the book Adverse Possession, which you can get today, available through the Crossover Alliance. And simply go to Amazon.com or the Crossover Alliance. You can also go to Jess's website at JessHanna.com to get the book and also get more information about Jess. And Jess, I want to again thank you so much for being with us on the show and helping us unpack the topic of Adverse Possession, which is the book, and about Christian speculative fiction in general. So I'm really glad you're able to join us today. Now, I want to kind of get your final thoughts on our topic before we go. And we're talking to the author out there who God has given the gift to write, and they want to write in the weird and the unusual and the strange, and they're afraid to do so because of the backlash they may receive, or because they're just scared of failure, of being told they're not good enough, it's not good enough, it's not Christian enough. I want you to speak to them. So give us your final thoughts and speak to that writer who God has given the gift to write and has not picked up the pen.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Parker. I've enjoyed being on the show, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts on different situations and also to share my work with your listeners. And for the person that has a story that they feel God has impressed on their heart to tell, I guess the most basic advice that I could give is to just write it. Even if you feel like it's not the best thing, or if you feel like maybe it's a little too out there, you can always rewrite things later. You can always get feedback. I would say to be definitely open to critical feedback and to be willing to make adjustments along the way. I know a lot of times as authors we're categorized as having somewhat fragile egos, but even if we don't like what we're hearing and react accordingly, we should still have the ability to step back and look at our work objectively and make the changes that need to be made. I'm sure, as you know, with your own writing, we've gone through probably several drafts of work and played things around in our head to see if it is actually going to work with the story. And I would say to just keep going and measure everything, at least in my case, since I am a Christian, to make sure that it aligns with Scripture and that I'm not saying anything that would lead someone away from God, but lead them to God.
Jess, thank you for those wonderful words of wisdom. I was really resonating with you because, like I said before the show, I just started my own pen name under speculative fiction. There are some definite Christian themes in there, even though I wouldn't call it, let's say, an overtly Christian story. There are some Christian themes in there. And, of course, as an author, I would never desecrate the Lord's name. I would never do that. So I'm really glad you mentioned that because we live in a time where pop culture is dictating people's thoughts and dictating people's ideas and beliefs, and we want to be able to counteract that with good speculative fiction that may make people think. So I'm really glad you took time out today to share that with us on the show. Now, if people want to get a hold of you, where can they find you online?
Well, I can be found on Facebook at Jess Isaac Hanna, or you could just search for Jess Hanna, and I should come up there. You can like my Facebook page. Also, I'm on Twitter, and my handle is at Jess Isaac Hanna. Also on my website, jesshanna.com. And those are pretty much the main avenues that I use for communication about different things that are going on or sharing thoughts.
Jess, thank you so much for being with us today on the show, and I'm real glad to have you. Hopefully we can have you back soon.
Oh, thank you, Parker. I've had a wonderful time and appreciate, again, the opportunity to be on the show.
And we were talking today to Jess Hanna. He is the author of the book Adverse Possession, which is available today on Amazon.com, and it's available at the Crossover Alliance. So go to either website, Crossover Alliance, or Jess Hanna's site, jesshanna.com, or Amazon. I want you to go ahead and love on my brother, buy his book, be blessed. Even though it's in Christian horror, I know you're going to absolutely enjoy his book. So go ahead and get a copy of that today. And be sure to follow him on Twitter at Jess Isaac Hanna on Twitter, and then again visit his website, jesshanna.com. I want to thank you so much for joining me for this edition of The Right Stuff. We've been having a great time talking about Christian speculative fiction for the new year. And if you are a writer who wants to write in the speculative fiction genre, please go ahead and do that. God gave you the gift to write, and I'm sure as creative as you are, there's a way you can possibly interweave your Christian faith with your love for the dark, strange, and unusual. Don't forget to join me Saturday for the Parker J. Cole Show. I will be talking to Jory Micah as we talk about gender equality in the church. So you definitely want to join me on Saturday for the Parker J. Cole Show at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time right here on WPJC 104.5. If you ever want to be on the show, send me an email. My email address is rightstuffradio@gmail.com. You can follow the blog at therightstuffradio.wordpress.com. Thank you so much for joining me. I am the Queen of Tuesday Nights, Parker J. Cole, and you have a wonderful, blessed day. Thank you for joining us for this edition of The Right Stuff. Follow Parker online at parkerjcole.com. To hear this show and other shows, visit the show archive at therightstuffradio.wordpress.com. We'll be back same time next week, 7 p.m. Eastern Time.